Okay, good evening, friends. The story begins. My hope is that in the next half hour or so, we have an understanding of how to have more respectful love, authentic love, because ironically, as beautiful as love is, it can be perverted. That's number one. Number two, my hope is that we learn to believe in people. And we'll derive these messages from this week's Parsha. But let's start from the beginning of the Parsha. I'll read in English just with a loose translation. Hashem tells Moshe, speak to Aharon, to his brother. Tell him to light the candles, the candelabra, to the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, and early in the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And by the way, it doesn't say actually light the candles. It says, Rashi points out, if you translate it literally, it's Beha'aloscha, to bring up flames, because he had to hold the flame there until it ignites independently. They should light toward the middle of the menorah. All 7 candles need to be basically facing the menorah in the middle. And then the Torah says, Vayas Kain Aharon. Aharon did it. He lit the menorah toward the middle, toward its candles, as God had commanded Moshe. Then the Torah goes on to tell us again how the menorah has been crafted. As beautiful and detailed as that golden menorah is, ironically, it's one solid piece. It's not a bunch of pieces put together. And that was an integral part of the menorah, which we'll get to soon. The Torah says, Vayas Kain Aharon. Aharon did it. And Rashi tells us, he quotes from the Midrash, this is a praise to Aharon. He didn't deviate. He didn't change. He did exactly what he was told. Why is Rashi telling us that? Because he's quoting it from a Midrash. Fine, but why is the Midrash telling us that? Why is the Midrash telling us that the reason why it says and Aharon did so is because he did not deviate? That's kind of offensive. If I was Aaron, I'd be like, hey, were you expecting me to deviate? Aaron is Moshe's brother, handpicked by God to accompany Moshe in redeeming the Jewish people, and then ultimately, permanently, being the forefather of those designated to serve the Jewish people, the Kohen Gadol, the head Kohen. Yeah, this guy doesn't deviate, at least not this time. Like, come on. Why would we expect that Aharon would have deviated, that he would have changed the task? This is a question that several commentaries raise. They don't rise it, they raise it. Raise, yeah? Okay. This is a question. That was early. We barely even got through a couple of minutes. Okay. Sorry. This is a question.
Well, you're definitely going to need an editor for your book.
Yeah, exactly. That's for sure. I can't take any of these transcripts, right? This is a question that many of the commentaries raise. And I'd like to share with you tonight 2 answers. Answer number 1. Aharon is the epitome of love. By the way, historically speaking, you know who else is the epitome of love? Avraham Avinu, Abraham. He was also considered to be the epitome of love. Their spiritual DNA, if you will, their spiritual identity was represented by chesed, by kindness, by love. Different people have different personalities or dominant personalities. We all have a bit of a mix, but people have different dominant personalities. For example, the famous story of Hillel and Shammai, where the potential convert came to Shammai and said, tell me the whole Torah in 1 foot. He chases him out. And then Hillel tells him, what you don't want done to you, don't do to others. Love your fellow. That's the whole Torah. Right? One is a disciplined personality. One is a kindness personality. A gevura versus a chesed. Different people have different personalities. Some people have a mix. Some people have one that is more dominant than the other. Aharon was dominated by chesed, by kindness. He was the epitome of love. Avraham Avinu, by the way, was also the epitome of love. He's standing outside in the heat with his 4-door tent because he wants anybody to come in in any direction. He had just gotten a bris from a world-class Moel that happened to have been himself. And he's waiting for guests instead of sitting inside sleeping and recovering. Because he was chesed, he was kind. But in his relationship with God, his relationship was love-centered. That was Avraham Avinu. Aharon's relationship with God was also love-centered. Just the reason why I mention Avraham is because they're both love, but I just for a moment want to contrast the two types of love. There's different types of love. If you look in a siddur, there's the long blessing we recite right before the Shema. And what is the blessing? It depends which siddur you look in. In some siddurs, and this is in the Chabad siddur, it's Ahavas Olam, Ahavtanu. Ahavat Olam, God, you've loved us with a worldly love. If you look in other siddurs, and particularly an Ashkenaz siddur, it doesn't say Ahavas Olam, it says Ahava Rabbah. Great love. Why? Well, there's two different types of love, and there's a debate in the Talmud. Which one is supposed to be said in that blessing? The blessing prior to the Shema. And, okay, there's different traditions. There's the Ashkenaz tradition, there's the Arizal's tradition. But the Kabbalists explain that Avraham was Ahavas Olam, was worldly love. Aharon was Ahava Rabbah, was great love. What's the difference between worldly love and great love? Worldly love is a love for God that centers around your relationship with God and the world, God's relationship with the world, which essentially means, what has God done for me lately? Which is a beautiful thing. It's appreciation. But it does define God from our world, from our perspective, from our lenses. I appreciate God the way I see him, the way I got to know him, which is very consistent with the history of how Avraham Avinu found God, with his mind. The famous story that the Midrash tells us, where he's gazing at the sky and he says, who's the ultimate power? Must be the sun. It's beating down on me. And then the clouds cover the sun. It must be the clouds. Then the clouds get pushed by the wind, and then it must be the wind. The wind is blocked by the trees. Must be the trees. The trees are growing because the sun is beating on them. Okay, maybe the sun is the ultimate. And he kept thinking, and he realized, okay, there must be an ultimate power. Must be God. His relationship with God was very much from a human lens, at least in the beginning. That's Avas Olam. It's a worldly love because it's from the lenses of this world, of our world. Aharon was Ahava Rabbah. Intense, passionate, fiery love. Not because of, I appreciate what you've done for me, or appreciate how what you are to me. I appreciate you independently. And when it comes to God, I might not fully even understand what that means. But for some reason, it triggers my soul. And it gets me to be on fire. This is Aharon's love. As great the love was of Avraham, Aharon's was much more intense. It was Ahava Rabbah, not Ahavas Olam. This is alluded to by him kindling the menorah, kindling fire, kindling flames, connecting to God in that sense, in that way. And what happens when we are of crazy love? Or what could happen? You know what could happen? Well, love could be the most beautiful things for relationships. Love can also destroy relationships. Because what is love? In contrast, let's say, to respect. Love is how I feel about you. The more intense the love, the more I am experiencing you. There's a lot of me that can get in the way of that relationship. There's a lot that can go wrong in relationships when we think too much about ourselves. So love, as important as it is for a relationship, can ironically harm a relationship. And the intense love of Aharon, you can see where there's a lot of space for things to go wrong here. And for the relationship to become very self-centered. For some reason it didn't. Like Rashi says, Aharon didn't deviate. Despite how great his love was, despite how passionate he is, despite how bought in he is with his heart and soul, it didn't become about him. He didn't change. He didn't deviate. It wasn't about him. It was about his mission. It was about his purpose. Like the Tanya says, you see this in chapter 41. You see this in other places as well, that love kind of needs to be tempered with respect. Because the difference between love and respect is that love is about me, respect is about you. And when the love is tempered with respect, now the love can be selfless and can focus on the mission, on the purpose, on the meaning, on the calling, not just on how it feels. I'm going to give an example. I was debating whether I should share this example. And there's two reasons why I'm hesitant to share this example. Number one, not so much for you guys listening live, but for those who might be listening on YouTube, I might be getting tons of comments by people who are offended. And that is just okay. You're helping the algorithm. Thank you. That old trick. But number two, I would say what I'm about to say is partially accurate, partially perhaps accurate, which makes everything I'm about to say all the more offensive. The example I'd like to give is about Jesus. Because if you want, the way Judaism views Jesus is as a heretic who had deviated from Judaism, from Torah, and ultimately, whether it had been him or whether it had been his disciples after he had died, only once, after he had died, but there's this Bible 2.0, a New Testament, which is antithetical to Judaism. You can't possibly, again, my point of this class is not to disprove Christianity, but just bear with me for a moment. I know we're going a little bit on a detour here. But if you believe that the Old Testament is true, then you can't believe in the New Testament. And if you can't believe in the New Testament, and if you believe in the New Testament, it doesn't make sense because it's predicated on the Old Testament. So there's like this internal contradiction. Essentially, there is no 2.0. God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. This is his law, and that law doesn't change. It doesn't change. It comes Jesus, and let's assume, for argument's sake, and again, this is the part that I don't know if it's 100% true. It could be he had malicious intent from the get-go. I don't know. Let's assume for a moment he didn't have malicious intent from the get-go. Heretical, malicious intent from the get-go. Let's assume he had a genuine love for God. That's how it started. Because Jesus, at least according to the Christian rhetoric, did preach a lot about love. And where did that love take him? So far as to that it had no longer become centered around God. It becomes centered around himself. Because God's laws aren't even being followed anymore. Things go from Saturday to Sunday to these commandments aren't relevant anymore to all you need to do is believe in this one deity, in these three deities, whatever it is, and the faith in one God and his commandments and his 613 mitzvahs don't matter anymore. My point is, one can get so absorbed in love that they deviate from the ultimate purpose. And love and purpose can be at odds with each other. Because love is how I experience things, and purpose is something that is outside of me, beyond me. And loving my purpose requires a lot of focus. That's intense. And for Aharon, who is the epitome of love, the epitome of passion, for him to stay focused on his purpose and not deviate, that is an important lesson for every single Jew reading the Torah. That is a very important lesson. That requires an immense amount of focus, of self-honesty, of not allowing the love to take over, but allowing the love to help us, work with us, not work against us. There's a midrash. It's an interesting midrash because if you look in the midrashim books, you won't find this midrash. Apparently it got lost, but it's quoted by later commentaries. It's quoted by the Maharal of Prague. It's quoted by the author of the Ein Yaakov and by others, where the sages are debating which verse in the Torah, which verse in the Bible encapsulates the whole of Judaism. And one says it's the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. That's the whole. That's everything. Without one God, what do you have? Another says no, love your fellow. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. Then a third one quotes a verse from Parshas Pinchas where it talks about the daily sacrifice. As a keves echad ta'aseh v'boker, bring one ram in the morning. V'as a keves hasheni ta'aseh b'rabbayim, bring another ram in the evening. The consistent korban offering, and they're all like, what? That doesn't sound so meaningful. That doesn't sound so introspective and spiritual. Yeah, but it's about consistency. It's about showing up every single morning and every single evening, daily. But here's the irony. That's discipline. And who is the one that had to show up to actually do this, to represent us? The Kohen. The people of love. The people of love somehow found it within their heart to also include discipline. Because love without discipline isn't love. It's just selfishness. And you know what that turns into? That turns into fear. That turns into making decisions out of what's going to happen to my love if I do or don't do this. And that might not be the best thing depending on the context. Let me share with you another answer to our question. Our original question was, Moshe instructs, based on the command of God, he instructs Aharon to light the menorah. Aharon does it. And says, Rashi, he didn't deviate. Good job, Aharon. And our question was, why would we expect Aharon to have deviated in the first place? One of my favorite books is a book called Likutei Torah. And I have it over here. Exhibit A. Likutei Torah are teachings on the Parsha by the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi. I have it here. I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. Okay. It's one of my favorite books. Fiery. It's passionate. You could tell that to the author, the soul is like real, man. And he gives you a different way of reading the Torah. He explains the Torah from a very spiritual or soul dynamic. And one thing he explains is that Aharon is the epitome of love. His job is to light the candles. Well, what are candles? Well, the book of Proverbs says candles are a euphemism for the soul. Ner Hashem nishmas Adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. That's what it says in the book of Proverbs. When Aharon is told to light the candles, what he's really doing, besides for literally lighting candles on a candelabra, what he's also doing is inspiring souls to be candles. Don't just be a wick. Don't just be oil. Don't just be fuel. But you have to have a flame to be called a candle. Otherwise, you're just a blob of material. And if we're not connecting to our purpose passionately, we're just a blob. We're not being who we're supposed to be. And Aharon's job is to inspire us to be who we're supposed to be. And you know who we're supposed to be? We're supposed to be a soul. But souls can be diverse, believe it or not. Because how many branches of the menorah were there? 7. There's the 7 diverse personalities. We mentioned earlier Hillel and Shammai were love and discipline, or Moshe and Aharon, love and discipline. Avraham Avinu, discipline. There's 7 diverse personalities. And Aharon's job is to inspire you, to illuminate you, so you become your best self. But you know what actually happens when you become your best self? You realize that although you have individuality, at your core, you're part of the same menorah as everybody else. That's why the Torah then tells us that the menorah is not a bunch of pieces and parts assembled together, but it's one solid piece of gold. And it was basically banged out into the shape of a menorah, individual branches, but at its base, it's all one. And when we realize who's lighting us and what we actually are when we illuminate, even with our own individuality, at our base, at our core, we're all one. We're that gold, there's that pureness. And we need to find an Aharon in our life who's going to look at us and see that within us. Now, if I was Aharon, and there's a good reason why I'm not, I might deviate. You know what I might say? Okay, there's certain people among you whom I can illuminate, but some of you, I don't know. You guys sinned with the golden calf. In this week's Parsha, you complain that there's no meat, which just happens to be this actual Parsha, to the point that God has to take care of some of us. And then there's like complaints that there's no water, and then there's like, it's just problem after problem after problem. These Jews are constantly complaining and getting in trouble for it. The whole situation with the spies coming up in a few parshas, there's just like a lot going on with these people. These people are complicated. These people are traumatized after 210 years of slavery in Egypt. I can believe in some of you. Some of you might need a more manageable expectation of to what degree you're supposed to shine. That's what I might have said. And this is why God didn't call me to be Aaron the priest. Or he did, and I got to stop saying that. One of the two. But that's my point. Aharon didn't deviate. Aharon didn't look at it that way. Aharon didn't buy into those limitations. Aharon said, you're a Jew, you could shine. Yeah, but I have baggage. So? Yes, you do have baggage. You have problems. You have challenges. You have life experience. And guess what you need to do? Shine. Don't use that as an excuse, but use that as an asset. It's part of you. And because of that, you got to take it and you got to shine, you got to illuminate. Aharon didn't change because he believed in people. Pirkei Avos says we should be a student of Aharon. So I guess we all have to be like Aharon. We have to follow his ways. What does it say? Be a student of Aharon. Talmidav shel Aharon. Be a student of Aharon. Ohev es habriyos. Doesn't say love people or even creations. Or it says love creatures. There's certain, and then bring them close, reel them in. There's certain people that they're like, the only good thing you could say about them is that they're creatures of God. And we got to believe in them too, because that's what Aharon did. And when we do, everything changes. Those complaining, difficult, complicated Jewish people somehow make their way back because you believe in them. Aharon didn't change. He didn't give up. I was once working with a client who wanted to show up in his home with more passion, with more love, with more generosity. And I said, if you were to walk in the door and that was just like written all over you, what do you think people might notice? He says, I have too much emotional baggage to walk in the door after work and bring my best self home. So I said, I want you to imagine for a moment you're driving home from work. And by the way, there was a time in my life where I may have taken what he had said for face value and said, oh man, I can't believe in you anymore. You have too much baggage. But I decided I'm going to believe in him anyways. I said, I want you to imagine you're driving home from work. And as you get on the freeway, you pulled out of the parking lot, you get on the freeway, you go, ugh, I forgot something. Not my keys, because I'm driving. It's not my phone. Not my brief. Oh, I left all the emotional baggage at work. Oh, God. I said, would you like that? He says, yeah. I said, okay, so go with me here. You're driving home, and you forgot your baggage. Okay, so all you have is that generosity and love and kindness that you want to walk in the door with. What do you think people might notice? I was empowered and honored to be able to believe in this person so he could describe the best version of himself. Aharon looks at us, and there's a part of us that all have to step up to the plate and be like Aharon, and says, yeah, I know there's challenges. I know. There's a whole Bible here of honest description. I'm still going to light up your soul. I'm still going to empower you. I still want you to show up with love and passion. I'm not deviating. I believe in you. I'm not giving up. This is exactly what Rashi is telling us about Aharon. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.